Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Networker podcast by Covve. I'm your host, Yiannis Gavrielides, CEO at Covve, and together we will explore how important relationships are to our careers and our lives in general. Our guest today is Larry Quinlan. Larry is the former Global CIO at Deloitte. He has overseen teams of over 10,000 professionals across 175 countries and serves on numerous boards right now, including ServiceNow, JLL, Booking Holdings, and UBS Americas. Thank you for joining me, Larry.
It's my pleasure.
So, Larry, you often reflect on your journey from a small island, St. Kitts, to becoming the global CIO of Deloitte. Can you share how your early life experiences shaped your career?
I think about it a lot. One of the speeches I give is, how does a skinny black kid from an island of 35,000 people become the global CIO of one of the world's largest professional services firm? And it's definitely true that my early environment influenced me greatly. I had parents who deeply believed in education. My dad never finished high school, but yet was so reverent about education. In fact, later in his life, he fulfilled the dream of becoming a lawyer, going to law school in his 50s, because he believed so much in education. My mother was a lifelong educator who insisted every night that we finish our homework, whether there was homework to be done or not. So there was this belief in education, this belief in work, this belief in accomplishment that comes from parents who really, really, really care. And then teachers in school and in my public school who really took an interest in me, who really cared, who really nurtured me. It was truly an environment that helped. But one of the things I learned there is that relationships really mattered, that the interest individual teachers took in me really, really was important. The mentoring I received from specific people in society really, really mattered. And it is that added value that comes from carefully built relationships that makes a huge difference.
Amazing. And on the, I love the part about education. I think that's important, and it's very important how it's shaping. So I'd love to discuss that later with you, how education is changing. So you mentioned relationships. Is there a particular relationship that had a transformative impact on your career, or it influenced your leadership approach? Is there one that you can pinpoint?
I think there are actually two or three. I recall being at Deloitte and getting an opportunity to become Global Chief Information Officer of our consulting business. And there's one partner who I'm still close to, Stephen Sprinkle, who decided that I had what it took to become the technology leader of our globalizing consulting practice. And Stephen intervened in a number of ways, culminating in my becoming a partner in the firm. And that was a really defining element of my career. Prior to that, we had done a merger, and I was considering whether or not I should move from New York City to Tennessee, and thought maybe that was not a move in my best interest. And another partner in the firm, Ron Jenks, really helped me understand the power of the firm and why moving was in my best interest, and almost single-handedly convinced me to move from New York City to Tennessee to take on a leadership role in the combined firm. And there are others like that, but these are people who took an interest when they didn't have to, who made something happen when they were not compelled to. And the power of the network and the power of relationships becomes evident.
You emphasized, even in our first meeting, you emphasized the importance of being intentional about those relationships. And like even a minute ago, you told me you talked about carefully managed relationships. Can you share with us how you proactively cultivate and manage the relationships that are meaningful for you and make sure that they remain meaningful and you remain in touch with them?
I think there are two elements to this. The first is building the network, and then the second is the intentionality around maintaining the network. In terms of building the network, I did it all wrong. You think about people who perhaps can help you, or you think about the kinds of people you absolutely think you can benefit from. And I found that to be wrong. It's a bit mercenary. I actually believe that everyone I talk to makes me better in some way. They change my perspective, they add value in my life. And the notion of having people in the network is not so they can help me. The notion of having people in the network is that I just become a better person due to the perspectives of the people in the network. And try not to just pick people who you think are going to help you, because sometimes the people you think are going to help you won't, and people you didn't think were going to help you do. So stop worrying about who's going to help you and just enjoy relationships with people, because I become a better person when I do so. And also getting joy out of having people in my network who I can help, as opposed to as opposed to always thinking about how they can help me. So I had to learn to put away the benefit part of the equation and think about the perspective I gained from being with people, any assistance I could provide to people, and building a network that way. And if there's benefit in the future, that's great. And that's just additional gravy on the top. In terms of being intentional about it, I also had challenges with that, because we're all busy people and I would just forget. And really started to think about how would I ensure, if I were going to a city and had time, could I have dinner with someone? Uh, could I have breakfast with them? I would miss everyone's birthdays. So could I just create a list and say, all right, I'm going to reach out and text someone today and say, happy birthday. Simple things like that. Nothing massive. And then one day I was trying to figure out how to do this better. And I actually ran across your product, Covve. And I thought, this ought to be interesting. Let me do a trial of it. And I didn't think it would work. I thought it would be cumbersome. I thought it'd just be too much effort. One of these CRM systems where I got to put so much information in and never get anything out. And wow, it was easy to use. And I said, wow, I've got to, kill the free trial, make it a paid subscription. I'm really going to do this. And I've actually been really intentional about using it, because it's so easy for me to systematically reach out to people who I really want to keep in touch with. And that's been a lifesaver for me.
Thank you for the kind words, Larry. And I love the comment about the reciprocity and the perspective when you build your network. I mean, I think it's really eye-opening, because very early on in our careers, we're just taught to find the right people, but a lot of times it's not evident who they are, and many times you realize that the right people are the ones that you're actually able to help each other, and that those they become friendships, and they become very powerful. And I'm very happy you're enjoying our Covve app. So we spoke about specific relationships. I think what really fascinates me is the fact that you started managing big teams and so many thousands of people. And my next question is all about that challenge. How do you then foster collaboration? How do you build trust within those teams, especially in such high pressure environments?
Building relationships at scale is an interesting intellectual challenge, right? How do you influence culture? How do you inspire followership at scale across cultures and countries becomes really, really important. I learned a number of lessons, sometimes painfully, about how that works. Even in an age of technology, I found you have to show up when you can. So creating that culture where people believe you care enough to show up when you can. Now, budgets matter. You can't just travel all over the world every single day. Budgets matter, but showing up when you can at moments that matter are important. Demonstrating to people that they are important enough for you to visit. So when I sat in, when I occupied that chair, I would go to various offices and I would have lunches with our team there. And in some cases, the team sitting in a remote office is a relatively junior team. And people would remark on the fact that the global CIO spending time with 5 or 6 junior level technology staff members in an office might not be the right use of the global CIO's time. I firmly believed it was absolutely the right use of my time in building relationships with an entire team at scale, lunch by lunch, team by team. There was also a tone to the communications, letting people know that this wasn't just, a message that a communications person had put together. Of course, our communications people worked on them, but I had to put my own tone to the message. People had to know it was authentic. I had to remark on things that were important to them. I had to appeal to them so that they knew I was intentional about building a relationship with them. I found I also had to expose more of who I was. I ended up talking about my daughters and the messages and challenges we're having. And people responded enthusiastically to that. They would send emails back asking, "How are your daughters?" And people really want to know who you are before they trust you. And then creating a message that actually inspires followership, and have to stop and ask ourselves, is this message worthy of the team? Is it worthy of people actually following it? Will this inspire anyone? And all of those things were important aspects in building relationships at scale across time and space.
And do you feel that those behaviors, would they trickle down? Would you see the leaders of those like national teams then actually do the same with their teams? Do you think that you could lead by example there? Like being vulnerable. I mean, I'm just using some of your examples, being vulnerable, opening up to the team, showing that actually I care about your challenges and your priorities. I'm not just here to pass a message.
In some cases, yes. Some people are comfortable with it, and others never get the hang of it. It's important over time to end up with a team of leaders who can really help influence that culture. One of the things about teams that win, it's not really a matter of whether they had the same strategy as the team before. The question is everybody on the same team executing the same strategy? That becomes really, really important. So for a strategy to succeed, it's important that the majority of people on the team buy into it. So over time, it becomes necessary to change some people or change the roles of individuals to ensure that you have a team that's executing together.
Great, thanks for that. So it's 2024, so I cannot not mention AI. So I want to ask you, with AI infiltrating and reshaping the workplace right now, how do you think leaders can make the most of it?
I really think the use of AI is industry dependent. In some industries, it will be more of a cost play and a productivity play. We can churn out marketing materials faster. We can improve the quality and reduce the cost of our help desk. But in other industries, it will be life-changing. It will be able to create new business models based on AI, just as we were able to create new business models based on the cloud. So the approach one would use depends on the use cases in that particular company and industry sector. And I believe leaders would be well served to do two things. Spend a lot of time focusing on what are my use cases that make sense for my company. And second, how can I prepare my organization, my talent for the wave that's coming? How do I get them curious about it? What tools can I provide that they become really conversant with the technology and not afraid of it? Those are two things that I believe are hugely important.
And what about individuals? I mean, what would be your advice to individual team members? How can individuals within teams become better equipped to utilize successfully the technology for the use case within their companies?
It's an ongoing challenge, but it's also generational, right? The next generation is always more inclined to adopt technology faster than the previous generation. So in some ways, this problem solves itself because my daughters are busy using Gen AI every day as if it was here for the last 100 years. All right. But people of our age, my age for sure, it requires much more intentionality. But training, online training, hands-on, playing with the tools, not being afraid of them, experimentation, understanding what they could do, getting ideas about them will be hugely important as opposed to simply running away from them with fear in our minds that it's all going to replace our jobs. I don't I don't know who to attribute this saying to, but there's a saying out there now that it isn't AI that's going to take our job, it's someone using AI that's going to take our job. And I think that's very, very true in many cases.
And you mentioned education in the beginning, and this is to me, I mean, even the example of how your daughters would use AI is interesting because do you think education has changed to cater for more curiosity and for more self? Because you mentioned you can find an online training course, for example. The whole education system has changed since our times to what we're facing today. Do you think education has evolved, or have the younger generations found new ways to educate themselves?
I think it's evolved, but the different kinds of education. So we've clearly seen an evolution, if not a revolution, in the availability of high quality, low cost, in many cases, free online training on any variety of topics. This is stuff that used to be very expensive to acquire. You'd have to get on a plane, go somewhere, take time off, spend a lot of money. And now this high quality stuff is available at nominal costs, in some cases, no costs at all. Uh, it's just incredible how quickly that has evolved. And the formal training in schools, universities, etc., that's in its infancy because professors, teachers are wrestling with the notion of should we ban Gen AI? Should we allow Gen AI? Will Gen AI make students stupid? Will it make them smart? And everybody has an opinion on this. I'm not an education expert by any means, but we've been through this. There were teachers who believed that the introduction of calculators into math classes would result in students who knew absolutely nothing about math. And that is clearly not true. There were teachers who believed that students who could no longer do long division by hand were not adequately prepared. I think the last 2 or 3 decades has shown that's absolutely not true. So I think we'll settle into our version of truth as it relates to Gen AI with a better understanding of how to harness it in education as opposed to trying to ban it in education.
Thank you for that. And I suppose that Gen AI could be the educator in many of these cases, right? Gen AI could be helping us getting educated about its use and how to use it.
I think so, over time. Don't know that it's there yet, but this thing is improving, it seems, day by day. And what it's capable of 3 years from now, I think we don't even know.
Okay, so here's a spin on that question. So as human and machine interactions evolve, and we interact with Gen AI more and more, as you said, it's evolving so fast. It's going to become even more seamless to interact with the machines. How do you foresee it affecting human-to-human relationships?
I I don't know that it will dramatically, but I reserve the right to be wrong. So if you think about human relationships, let's think about two young people dating, and one has to go off to college somewhere, and there is no FaceTime, there's no WhatsApp video in those days. So the only way they could communicate is by letter. And then you move to be able to talk by phone. And now people can FaceTime every night and see each other. And one would say, has the technology dramatically transformed long distance relationships? I'm not a relationship expert. I don't know, but I think people had long distance relationships before we had video, and they'll have long distance relationships after. So you look at, okay, so that's one kind of relationship. The other is, boss and employee, co-workers, husbands and wives. Will AI fundamentally change those relationships? I'd argue no. I would argue that AI will be a supporting tool in executing those relationships as opposed to fundamentally changing those relationships. There will be anomalies. There is a very tragic story in the newspapers this week about a high school or middle school child who became so infatuated with a bot that they ended up committing suicide. I don't know all the details of it, not an expert in that space, but from the stories I read, that's tragic. Would we expect that to be the norm? No, I don't think so. I think that would be an anomaly, and we can expect tragic and happy anomalies over time, but I don't see it fundamentally changing the way we execute relationships.
That's
I
great to
don't
hear.
think any wife is going to be satisfied with a husband using Gen AI to say, I love you.
I hope you're absolutely right. And interestingly, let me chime in that when we were discussing with Professor Dunbar, who is an expert in how humans form relationships, he has tons of research. He was explaining that technology over years has helped, as you speak about AI as well, has helped like video call, like the telephone, and then video calls have helped relationships, but haven't changed the fundamental aspects that make a relationship strong, the trust, the need for communication. They have actually facilitated it, but have not changed the fundamentals of it.
Because I think fundamentally as humans, there are just certain things we want and need. We want love, we want respect, we want trust, we want to feel that we've been heard, that we've been supported. All of these things really matter to us.
Great. So speaking about Deloitte, I've seen a survey by Deloitte a few days ago. It was actually published on the 21st of October, that where 90% of respondents across generations believe that in a workforce increasingly leveraging both human and machine capabilities, the human capabilities will play an essential role in career development. Now, I mentioned this because I'd like your opinion on which skills do you believe are going to be the most critical in today's rapidly changing technology landscape?
I believe there's some skills that remain needed no matter what, with or without technology. The ability to lead and inspire people becomes hugely important, even in the most technology-oriented companies. You still see that dynamic leader driving strategy, vision, shaping the marketplace, a human being. There isn't a technology, a computer out there making that happen. There are people shaping those companies, making the right bets, and inspiring people to follow, to invest, to execute, to make that happen. And in the case of Gen AI, you're seeing that as well. There are these influential individuals who are driving companies in that direction, and people believe in them, not only the technology itself. So that becomes hugely important. I believe one of the human traits that we've got, that we continue to need, is trust. We have to have leaders that we can trust, people that we believe have our best interests at heart. And yes, we live in a capitalist society, and there is a strong profit motive, as there should be. But we have to believe in the enterprises in which we work or do business with, that we can trust them, that the profit motive is such that it will inspire trustworthy transactions, trustworthy relationships, as opposed to those designed to completely rip us off. So that continues to be an important element of it. We have to be able to communicate. Now, Gen AI is making a name for itself in helping us improve communications, quicker drafts, better, once you take out some of the hallucinations, more facts at our disposal. But you've got to be able to make it yours and authentic and tell that story, as opposed to simply spitting out a Gen AI draft and saying, that's it, I'm done. So being able to communicate and tell the story, to effect change, to persuade, to sell, all of those are still traits that are going to be important. And in a world of technology turbulence, being intellectually curious and technologically curious become traits that we will value tremendously.
Thank you so much for this. Larry, it's been truly insightful and very inspiring. We've talked about many things. I'll just summarize some of the key things I'm taking away from this talk. You mentioned how important education has been in your career, and I think that's very important. We then discussed how important it is to remain curious and make sure that you intellectually educate yourself through every experience and every opportunity you have. We talked about relationships, of course. You mentioned carefully managed relationships. And I really love the part where you emphasized the fact that when you're growing your network, you need to be open to understand the value that other people bring, the ones that you maybe didn't guess would bring so much value, through their different perspective and through your ability to help them, because a lot of times that reciprocates, or it helps you gain a perspective you never had. So I thought that was very powerful. You mentioned using a system to be intentional, so being very proactive and being intentional about relationships. And of course, a lot of times that requires a habit, a system to make use of. You mentioned leading by example as a way to scale that. So we have these relationships. How do we scale them across a whole organization and building trust and collaboration in teams? So you mentioned leading by example, understanding the challenges and priorities of your team members and making the effort to show up. I'm taking that as a very powerful advice. Then we jumped to AI, talking about how leaders can understand, they need to understand the use case for that specific industry and their company in particular, and encourage their colleagues to actually test the technology and be curious about it, so they're better prepared to better leverage it for the company. We spoke about, which I loved, about AI actually affecting relationships positively and not really changing what makes us build relationships as humans. And finally, we closed off with the skills, leadership being the most important one here, being able to inspire, being able to build trust. And I love the way you phrased it, like that we know that these leaders have our best interest at hand. So that creating trust with our colleagues, our ability to communicate and communicate authentically, and our ability to stay intellectually curious. So I loved it. Thank you so much for that insightful feedback.
It was my pleasure.
I hope we continue staying in touch and you continue enjoying Covve as much as you said you do. And
Absolutely.
thank you so much for this opportunity, Larry.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Take care.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.